All right, it's our customary 35-minute Sunday night, Monday morning podcast with John Middlekauff, former NFL scout, 3 and Out podcast on the volume. Let's start with the Cowboys and Philadelphia. I thought Dallas, by and large, outplayed them. Got a couple of officiating breaks that didn't go their way. They missed a touchdown by about the length of a football. I thought Philadelphia was super conservative on their last 2 or 3 drives. This is one of those rare, what a great loss this was. You may get one of those every year. I thought Dallas outplayed them. What say you?
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think the thing that hurts, though, if you're Dallas, and this goes back to early in the season, losing that Arizona game, now that 2 game, you got 3 losses, they got 1. I thought coming into this game, Dallas had to prove that they could win a gritty game, because the way they win is they blow people out, and this game was right there for them to win. I mean, Dak, for the most part, was brilliant. I would say that's one of the better games he's played in years. Yeah. Now, the sacks, not totally his fault. I mean, he's under siege, but several sacks on the last 2 drives are killers. I mean, they really are. It puts you in 3rd and 20. The last, you got to go for the end zone in the last play. But overall, I'm with you. It's a good loss, because Dallas showed a lot of toughness. They showed that their quarterback could match you. But ultimately, it's a numbers game, and it almost, I don't want to say the division's over, but I think it's going to be very, very difficult. Now Dallas is just kind of headed back to that wild card spot again, and having their trajectory in the playoffs are just road games.
Yeah, and I think also, as you point out, this is the kind of game Dallas doesn't win, and it's the kind of game Philadelphia constantly wins.
I know.
So Dallas comes out of this thing and feels pretty good, and you want to say to yourself, have you been watching Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts for 2 years? This is how they win. Any game like, and by the way, I picked Philly to cover and win, and my whole play was best 3rd down team in the league, best 4th down team. Situationally, they'll pick up enough 1st downs to win. And I didn't love their last couple of drives, but this really is their formula. They get a lead. They have such a great pass rush. They're excellent situationally. Again, Dak doesn't step out of bounds. They get the 2-point conversion. But I think, to your point, Dak holding on to the ball just a step too long is the difference. It is interesting. These playoffs, first of all, if you have to go back to Philly, they're great at home. Yeah. Detroit, great at home. Seattle, if you have to face them, great at home. Not every team, right? Not every team is really, I mean, the Rams, home and away doesn't really matter. Cincinnati's the same team, home or away. But when I watch the NFC, these are teams at home. Goff is a much better home quarterback than road. Philadelphia is special. So I thought this game was crucial. I don't want to overstate it, but it felt big.
I think, you talked about them getting conservative at the end. I mean, I think he's a little compromised, the quarterback, Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
So you can't run him around, really. He's not really a great, slant, quick passing game guy. He excels on those go routes, but on 3rd and 5 to ice the game, those aren't ideal routes to run. I mean, even Greg Olsen at the end of the game was like, I don't love that, on 3rd and long. You want to run that on 1st and 2nd or down, but that's kind of their style. Now, ultimately, what separates them is that pass rush. They have so many guys. Think how many guys impacted Dak Prescott those final 2 drives. It's not just Hassan Reddick. It's Brandon Graham. Jalen Carter. I mean, they just got guy after guy after guy. Their secondary's flying around. Now, the hard part, if you're Dallas, I mean, your 2-star offensive weapons, I thought Pollard was flying around. CeeDee Lamb was dominant. The tight end was playing really good. It's tough. I mean, I like you said, it's not a bad loss by any means, just in a vacuum, that individual game. But in the grand scheme of things, when you had a chance to win, and really, let's face it, the game was kind of won. They're leading at halftime. The Eagles come out, score back-to-back touchdowns, and take complete control again. And then the Cowboys are on their heels and playing catch-up the rest of the game.
One of the things that did drive me nuts on that final drive for Dallas is they really outplayed Philadelphia for big chunks, but situationally, a delay of game, an illegal motion. This is where Dallas struggles. It's just in the details. You can't have delay of games when you're down there, right? I know you don't have timeouts. What are you delaying?
You can't take sacks, let alone penalties.
Yeah. So again, it's crisis management. That's where I think Philadelphia is really, really good. And that's strange because they have a young coordinator, a young head coach, a young quarterback. Dak and McCarthy and Schottenheimer have been around this sport combined forever.
I know.
And Philadelphia's got all the kids, and yet they're so good situationally.
One thing we were talking about, I think it was after the Cowboys got destroyed by the Niners, is Dak Prescott's not moving around anymore, and his game is not predicated on dominating the pocket. He clearly, the last 3 or 4 weeks, his mobility is back. He's become a good playmaker again. I mean, how many plays today did he make, keeping plays alive, extending it with his legs, eyes up, and then throwing the ball down the field countless times? If that's the version they're going to get out of Dak, beside the Eagles, I mean, they're going to beat a lot of teams with that version of their quarterback.
Yeah, I think, I look at the NFC now, and I think Philadelphia is the best team in the NFC. I'm not sure there is a second. Seattle, Geno Smith's never going to hoist a trophy. Okay, so San Francisco, I think, we're over dramatizing their struggles. If
these next couple weeks are big for them, though. I mean, they got to come out firing again.
Yeah, but if they could kick field goals, they win in Cleveland, and you're on a 2-game skid. Cincinnati's really good. The AFC early, the first month, the NFC beat the AFC. Since then, Jaguars look good. Bengals look good. Chiefs figure out ways to win. All of a sudden, the Ravens are on fire. It just, what happens, John, is eventually the truth comes out. Sunny football can benefit offenses. The really gifted teams, almost all, to me, outside of Philadelphia, are all AFC. I do like San Francisco. I think they'll be back. But, I one of the reasons I like Philadelphia, I think they're built for November, December football. I think their games are going to look a lot like this, where you're criticizing them a little here. You don't love their corners. But I think what we just watched is why they're going to get to the Super Bowl again, is that this is how they play. John, winning ugly is a talent, and they win ugly. I mean, God, the Commanders game was a mess.
I know.
They win ugly. It's like their formula.
Well, like Goddard today, he gets ripped down. Who knows? He was ruled out immediately. Maybe he breaks his arm. But they'd be able to handle that pretty easily for a 4 or 5 week stretch without him, because they got A.J. Brown, they got Devontae Smith, they got multiple running backs. The one thing that would make you nervous, because I'm with you, the DB play, a lot of teams in this league that are really good complain about their corners. If you have a good pass rush, you're going to be in it to win it. The quarterback clearly is just taking a lot of hits. He's pretty banged up. I was thinking the irony of getting rid of Harden this week, who constantly waves the white flag, and then having that guy in the same city who just, you think for a second, you're like, God, did he just sprain his knee? And he kind of shakes it off and he comes back. But he's not quite the same spry player that he was 12 months ago. So his ceiling, I mean, part of the reason they were right in it to win the Super Bowl against Mahomes, because he was brilliant. This version, he still throws a great go ball, but movement-wise, he's not quite as quick, and probably it's because his knee is banged up. And that to me is the only concern. The way he plays is pretty predicated on, obviously, throwing the ball, but movement. And right now, movement-wise, they're hesitant to call them runs, and rightfully so. You don't want to get them hurt. But to reach their ceiling and to win the Super Bowl, which clearly they have a Super Bowl level team, to me, it's on his health. Can he be, he's never going to be 100%, but can he be 90% going into the playoffs, or is he more like 75% going into the playoffs?
Okay, so I do want to talk Kansas City, Miami. I thought Kansas City made a complete statement in the first half, and then like Philadelphia, you feel like they're kind of holding on. I will say this about Kansas City, though. They have a clear hole, and it's never going to be a strength. They're just not special at wide receiver. Now, their first drive, they gave you a little bit of everything. I do think this receiving group will get better. It's young. There's no number one. I'm not sure there's a number two.
No.
But I'll tell you, that first half defense against Miami, that was one of the more impressive first halves. I mean, Miami was just the speed. This is without Bolton, the speed of Kansas City's defense. So as I sat and watched that first half, I thought, this is Baltimore, Kansas City, Cincinnati. That's the conference. And then in the second half, they didn't really have a second, third gear. What did you make of Kansas City? I came away impressed because they flew in very late for this thing, totally seized control early. But they can't put people away this year, John. They're not putting people away.
Well, they're going to struggle to score 25 points. I mean, they just are. The underrated part about them, because Mahomes, Kelsey now, especially this Kelsey over the last month, and Andy Reid take up so much oxygen, they're kind of a defensive team. I mean, Hill and Waddle had 100 yards, 104 yards total. Like, if you're holding those guys to around 100 yards, you're going to beat them. They're 21-0 at half. Like, I'm sorry, the game's over. I thought there was a lot more pressure. Kansas City's now proven exactly who they are over a 5-year stretch. Like, I'm pretty confident when the dust settles, they're going to be in the mix in the divisional round and more than likely the championship game in the AFC. This was kind of a prove-it game for Miami, right? You lose to Philly and Buffalo. Granted, now both on the road. You get a neutral site game. You fly out there on Monday, and you're down 21-0 at half. 21-0 at half. And like you said, this ain't the Chiefs' first rodeo. Check out a little bit. They're not explosive enough on offense to just take off, right, but they make enough plays when they have to. Miami kind of gets a freak fumble there in the second half for Mahomes.
Right.
But to me, this was the Chiefs established in the first half. Like, you're not on our level, just like Buffalo and Philly said that earlier. And listen, Miami's a fun story. Their coach is an easy guy to root for. When they're rolling, they're a fun team to watch. But I think it's pretty clear, whatever the upper echelon tier in the AFC is, obviously Baltimore's in it, Kansas City's in it, I think Cincinnati's in it, Buffalo. They are not, Yes. And that was, we don't even need to argue that anymore. I think the only question now is, could they win a playoff game? I wouldn't bet on them because it's going to be more than likely a road playoff game.
That's right.
But they're going to get back-to-back playoffs. Obviously, the franchise is heading in the right direction. But in terms of like AFC contenders, it is not the Miami Dolphins.
No, I mean, it's I've always liked Tua, but I've never loved him. And I do think when you speed the game up, and he had a couple drops today, but to your point, if you look at the history of football, the great teams have always been able to grind. Even the Niners with Walsh, Taylor, Joe Montana.
Defense.
Those teams, they were great defense. I mean, we never talked about that defense. And the reason we don't is because it's Joe Montana. Jimmy Johnson's Cowboys, real defense, Pro Bowlers everywhere.
Think about some of the homegrown Packer teams with Reggie White and, Leroy Butler and some of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, one of the knocks on the Packers, you say, why don't Favre and Rodgers win more? Well, they have when they have their best defenses in those quarterbacks' careers. And so even Peyton Manning, go back to the Peyton Manning team that won a Super Bowl in Indy. That was one of the best defenses he ever had. So I just think Miami is fun. I've been saying this, the Dolphins are the city. It's a lot of fake Gucci loafers and Rolexes that if you shower turn green. They're fun. They're interesting. But as the season progresses, they're just not built for this. And it's funny, as much as I like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, you probably are best served to give up Waddle eventually and just go get some more defensive help. That's my take on them, is that this coach, this quarterback, Tyreek Hill, you're going to score points in this sport. You've got to get better on your line play. Because that, to me, today with Kansas City, it was like, they just can't block certain people.
Yeah, I mean, offensive line, when they were healthy, wasn't good coming into the season. The good thing you have to feel if you have Miami is sometimes the hardest thing to get, obviously, is the quarterback, but also the coaching staff. The Mike McDaniel's clearly a very innovative young offensive coach. And Vic Fangio now has kind of proven to the spot, like, he's not going to be head coach anymore. So you got him, keep paying him a premium. You got that in play. Just get more defensive pieces. You have to be good at the line of scrimmage in this conference because, one, you got to rush the passer to beat the Joe Burrows, Lamar Jacksons, Patrick Mahomes, and you have to be able to block. I mean, you watch the Ravens today, obviously the Steelers, now the Chiefs have, revitalized their defense. You have to be able to neutralize other teams' fronts. Cleveland, all these teams now have multiple pass rushers. Every team has like $100 million guy and then like a guy probably making a $50 million contract. Right. So if you can't block, you look at Dallas down the stretch. They were relentless with all the pass rushers. And it's the 49ers. What do? They went and got Chase Young. They got another guy. So you just rush the passer, and you can get away sometimes with guys like me and you covering, offensive weapons in the secondary if you can, impact the quarterback.
All right, NBA fans, basketball is officially back, and the DraftKings Sportsbook, official sports betting partner of the NBA, is celebrating with an unbeatable offer. New customers can get $200 instantly in bonus bets by throwing down just $5 on the NBA. That is a good deal. Win or lose, doesn't matter. You'll start the season with an instant W, a win. All right, DraftKings parlays, everybody's got a shot to even more basketball wins and bigger basketball wins. String together multiple bets. It's called a parlay. Same game parlay. Build your parlay across multiple games. And what does that give you? Better odds, so you can make a smaller bet and win more money. I like doing them. I like parlays. They're fun. Basketball is more fun when you're in on the action. And with DraftKings, you will be. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app right now. Use the code Colin, COLIN. This NBA season, $10, $5. It's fun. It's juice. I love it. New customers, $200 instantly in bonus bets by betting just $5. Yeah, you heard it right. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The code is Colin, COLIN. The crown is yours. Don't miss the action this weekend when the NFL heads to Germany for the Frankfurt games. These games will air on the NFL Network. I'll be watching and stream on NFL Plus. Again, streaming on NFL Plus. For a limited time, Verizon customers can get Netflix Plus, NFL Plus for just $25 a month with Plus Play. That's $120 in annual savings. Plus Play is a platform where Verizon customers can shop, manage, and save on the subscriptions you already have, like NFL Plus. With NFL Plus Premium, you get access to games on mobile, NFL Red Zone, NFL Network, which means you can catch the Frankfurt games and more. Just go to Verizon.com/thevolume to bundle and save before the game. Hurry, this offer ends soon. Again, that's Verizon.com/thevolume. In sports, the scoreboard doesn't always tell the complete story. The dad who happens to be a world-class quarterback. Untold tales of athletes you thought you knew. The heart-racing pressure for the heart, soul, and survival of the multi-billion-dollar business of F1. Stories about college kids who were given a last shot, a last chance at redemption. David Beckham's meteoric rise, not only as a global soccer superstar, but becoming a pop culture icon. Upsets, injuries, come from behind victories. You're going to get it all. And I've seen it all with Netflix Sports. These are the stories that turn all of us into sports fans and give everybody something to cheer for, to feel for, to hold your breath for, and to get up out of your seat for. Whether you're a diehard or a brand new fan, intense or casual, shows like F1, Drive to Survive, Quarterback, Full Swing, Untold, Beckham, and more. Netflix has a story for every type of fan. Netflix turns us all into fans. Netflix. So I had said this when I watched Baltimore's first half against Tennessee in London a month ago. I said, this is the best Lamar's been, and this may be the best team in the league. And I've had them number one last several weeks in herd hierarchy, Baltimore and Seattle. Before I get to Baltimore, one of the things that I've always sort of worried about with defensive coaches, they don't do well with O-lines. They can't reboot them. I mean, how many years is Pittsburgh and Buffalo, those defensive coaches, going to get with that offensive line play? The second thing I worry about is sometimes they don't sense urgency with a quarterback. Mike Tomlin, Kenny Pickett, that's just not good enough in the AFC. It's just simply not good enough. No. What happens when you can't pay all these defensive players and you have to pay Kenny Pickett? You're going to have to pay both these receivers. So this is the time to win, and there's a true ceiling with Pittsburgh. Seattle, Geno Smith. Drew Lock and Geno Smith are not it. I do think Seattle is unique in that they don't have a bunch of needs now after getting a corner and a receiver in the first round last year, and they're both really good. They can go at the end of the first round and get a Bo Nix. They can go, Penix won't be available. So that worries me. But the thing about Baltimore, he's now Lamar Jackson 17-1 against the NFC. So think about this. Their concern is the AFC. If he got to a Super Bowl, if you've never faced Lamar, Detroit and Seattle are good teams. Absolutely discombobulated. You have nobody at practice to comp it with. No. And to me, the only way to beat Lamar is, we've seen him 4 times. I remember talking to the Chargers people. Remember his rookie year, the first time they faced him, they were lost. The second time they had a better sense of it. They're like, there's nobody like him in the league. And I just watched today and I'm like, Seattle. I don't know why I talked myself out of that game because I love Baltimore, but I kind of feel like if Baltimore gets to a Super Bowl, John, I'm taking them, and I'm taking them in a rout because I think the Cincinnati's and Kansas City's, that is the only way to beat them.
Well, if you think about it, Seattle and Detroit, 2 of their last 3 games, those teams, Seattle probably win 10-11. Detroit's going to win 12-13. You're talking 24 wins. you could argue both those games were over in the first quarter. The Detroit game definitely was. This game, early in the second quarter, this thing was over. So they, like you said, dismantled, embarrassed. Now, they got them both at home, but still, I mean, they're high end. Romo mentioned this on the broadcast. Lamar's playing at a really high level. The Zay Flowers pick looks awesome. Their defense is playing really, really well.
Really well.
So we just talked about it with Rodgers and Favre. When you get MVP, now with Mahomes, when you get MVP level quarterback play and you have top flight defense, we've seen the 49ers make runs with like a quarterback who's hovering between like the 15th and 16th guy. You give me a top 5 quarterback and a top 5 defense, like you really have no excuse if you're playing well to not be in the Super Bowl. So if you're just doing the power rankings, given how they're playing right now, I think I don't know how you would argue that no team is playing better than the Ravens as a complete football team. And the thing is, Lamar, to me, is just better than he's ever been, just under complete control. It's not all predicated on running. I was nervous when they brought in the offensive coordinator. They talk passing. You're like, well, you don't want to take away what he does really well. They've like blended it perfectly. The one problem is Greg Roman, they couldn't pass. And maybe it was the Zay Flowers addition has really helped. I mean, he's a fantastic addition. He's a really young, awesome player. And that's a good pick. And they're a good drafting team. So you shouldn't be surprised. You know, can I touch on one thing? I just don't want to. What a awful day for the Patriot dynasty. Belichick loses to a team that trades away their 2 best players. Josh McDaniels, that offense looks like Kenny Stabler was back today. They get rid of him. And obviously the story that Jay Glazer talked about, they couldn't stand the guy. And then on the other end, Brian Daboll, former Patriot guy, gets destroyed in that game. I mean, today, if it wasn't for Caserio and CJ Stroud, the Patriot dynasty would basically be completely dead. I think the one term that you heard with the Josh firing that I've heard forever in New England that people dealt with when you were winning, that when you're not, or even if you're just not making playoff runs, people are like, I'm out, is the walking on eggshells. And that worked historically in football. And listen, even as society changes, you still get yelled at in football, but it is completely different than what happened in the 70s, 80s, and 90s currently in the NFL. And think about Andy Reid, who's the best coach right now in the sport. He's never really been like that. That's not his style. Hell, even think of Pete Carroll, who's kind of resurrected his team. Much more of a positive, optimistic guy. The Belichick guys, in general, all they know is kind of negativity, walking on eggshells. That doesn't really work with the guys you're coaching now under 30. Just look at the way society works. That's not how people respond, but that's all they know. So Belichick right now, everyone's always on edge. Josh McDaniels had everyone on edge. You're not going to be productive. Whether you have the high-end talent or whether you don't, you're nowhere near going to maximize. Look at college now. Jim Harbaugh lightened up a little bit. They became offensively explosive. Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, much more pro offense. It just makes you happier. Belichick and Josh and Dable, these guys are kind of angry.
Matt Stafford couldn't stand Matt Patricia.
You got to loosen up, guys. But they don't. And I think all these guys talk about, I'm going to be my own guy. When you work I don't care if you work for Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos, if you spent all your time around whoever the most successful guy is in your industry for years upon years, how would you not emulate him and try to be like him, even when you're thinking about being yourself and it fails time and time again? Bill's screwed because their team isn't very talented. And these other guys constantly fail because I think they tend to be negative like Bill because they've seen it firsthand and they've seen it work. But I just don't think it works. I think you talked about last week, remove Brady. He is the dynasty. I think he could just handle the negativity and everyone kind of loosened up below him in the locker room. But it doesn't work once you go to these other places. And now Bill, like yelling at Mac Jones, he goes into a shell.
Yes. No, I think there's a lot about that. Okay, before we go, I do want to talk about one college note. So I don't know if Washington can win a national championship, but what a showcase of game it was for the Huskies. I said their defense is bad, but at least they're usually in the right place. USC fired Alex Grinch, their defensive coordinator, which, I mean, if you watch the game and if you've watched the last month, he stands alone by himself in the sidelines. They're in the wrong place. And these are guys that have played. Kalen Bullock, who was an All-American safety, has regressed. One of the first things I look at is, do players get better? USC's offensive guys do. None of their defensive guys do. None of them get better. So I don't know if USC will go out and spend a lot of money on the defensive coordinator, but how do you view this season and Lincoln Riley's sort of legacy? I know it's early in his career to talk about that, but I always viewed him as potentially an NFL guy. And my takeaway now is he's not. He just has no McVay, chest out, alpha, loves defense. Shanahan loves physicality. Shanahan don't care about special teams, but he loves defense, right? Yeah. Andy Reid, Spags. Andy realizes what defense is. Lincoln doesn't have a special teams coach. He's lopsided as a coach. What do you think his legacy right now is?
Well, I think, and listen, it's easy to crush him right now. Like probably most people, when they hired him, it was a no-brainer hire. You had to do it. But I think when you look back, the Big 12 is not very good, and no one plays defense, and he was able to take advantage of it. He ran into clearly the best year the Pac-12 has had in a long time. He's kind of getting worked, right? He loses to Utah. He loses this game. He's going to be a huge underdog this upcoming week, to Oregon. UCLA's leaking oil a little bit, but I think it's a disaster, Colin. Simply put, I think it's one of the biggest underachievements given the quarterback play and offense, because when you're at a program like this, you have unlimited resources to hire the best and the brightest. When you look at some of these other college coaches, they go to like the Baltimore Ravens and get their secondary coach and make him, their defensive coordinator. Chip Kelly's defensive coordinator is Anthony Lynn's son, who, if you look at his resume, had been in the NFL for the last decade, came from the Ravens. And what is UCLA? Yeah. A lot better on defense. So it's like, I don't know if you tell me who Lincoln's next defensive coordinator, I would not be very confident that you're going to go, that's a no-brainer choice, right? Because you look at the guys that we talked about it last week when they were, lose to Utah. Where did he find this guy? Well, he was a Mike Leach guy, right? It's a connection thing. And he's not, to me, part of going to the NFL too. Think of some of the coaches that went to the NFL from college most recently, beside Harbaugh, who was an NFL guy. Urban Meyer never coached a day, didn't know what to do, and he was completely over his head. Chip is a good example of a guy that had some success, but his problem is he didn't know any defensive coaches, right. So he couldn't hire very good defensive coordinators, and that was always his downfall. And now Lincoln is kind of going through this in college, and I go back to the Pete Carroll era. Pete Carroll's staff was really, really good. It had a perfect blend of like young up-and-coming guys, like the Sarks and the Lanes, and then the older Norm Chow's, Ken Norton's, the recruiters, the NFL experience, the young offensive innovative guys. And I just look, I go, I don't know. I mean, because when he took over at Oklahoma, it was Bob Stoops' brother. He inherited him. Then ultimately fired him for this guy, and it's just kind of unraveled, and he brings him with him. I don't have much confidence that he's going to hire a guy that people are going to feel very, very good about. Because I also think it's a culture in the way you practice. When you practice like he does with his offensive style, you don't really create a tough physicality. That's always what people have said. Defensive coaches, whenever you met them at these spread offense schools, and specifically the air raid type schools, and I know he's not true air raid anymore, it's like hard to improve the toughness on a daily basis on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in practice.
No, I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence. Tomlin, Dan Campbell, Mike Vrabel, I think the essence of their physicality, the essence of their personality, the way they structure practice is more physical. I mean, every Vrabel team, every Tomlin team, even though they're an offensive team more than defense, Dan Campbell, it's a physical offense. They can run the ball. I think sometimes with Mike McDaniel and Lincoln Riley, I think they're really clever offensively and really smart. And I think they structure their culture and their program and their practice like that. Yeah. And it's really smart and clever. But do they build the toughness? Is that part of the personality? And I don't think it's a coincidence sometimes that the same kind of physical, kind of big physical men, don't you think they structure practice differently?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not blaming Caleb, because you got to sign Caleb. You had to pay Caleb to get him. Every team in the country would have done that. But I do think when the way they built it, it was also Caleb heavy, that it almost sucked the oxygen out of everything else. And you watch it this year, and the last couple of weeks haven't been his fault. The Notre Dame game, he wasn't very good. But it just feels like if he is not, because even you go back to some of the heyday Pete Carroll teams, or some of those good Harbaugh teams or Chip Kelly teams, it was never all about Mariota or Luck or Matt Leinart. They were a more complete team. And this thing just felt like a basketball team. It was like Caleb Williams and then everyone else. And that is not the way you win in football. It's just not. And they've been clearly exposed. Even Washington's a good example. Their best player's a quarterback, but he wasn't, I would say, otherworldly against USC. The running back came through. Defense got some big stops. You watch Oregon, they're a complete team. Look at what Nick Saban's doing. You talk to any NFL scout, they're like, this is the least talented team in like 15 years. All of a sudden, he's going to be back in the SEC championship game.
Right. Yeah. And I think Mike McDaniel and Lincoln Riley, I do think they're brilliant guys, but both are regressing quickly as the season goes on. This sport always gets back to physicality and toughness and resilience and playing hurt and situational football and making stops. As much fun as it is to watch Caleb or Tua or Tyreek Hill, just got to be better and more physical situationally. And I mean, they had a goal line stand. USC did. They must have had 6 safeties and corners on the field. It's like, guys, it's like a track team.
I know.
Too small. All right, John Middlekauff, former NFL scout. Great as always, buddy. Appreciate it.
Have a good week, Colin. See you.